saw various issues which were very close to me. I saw them happening close to my house. Sand mining happened on the beach in Alibag, in Kihim, where I grew up, where I spent all my childhood holidays, and I couldn't bear it. I wanted to do something. So I did something that I would not recommend any of you do, which is that I went and I stopped a sand truck in 2004. And I had no, although I had been warned, I was told that there was a lot of political influence in sand mining, but nobody really knew what it was. And the result of stopping a truck in the middle of the night, which now people know but didn't then, was that of course I was attacked and I was hospitalized, and I realized that it's a very serious issue. um, what do you do when you're attacked? I have two choices. Either you give up because you realize it's going to be too hard, or you realize that this is an issue which you thought was a small local issue and wouldn't take too much trouble to solve, but actually it's a more serious issue, so you find out more data. So I found out more data. I filed public interest litigation in the High Court in 2006 because I was shocked at how little data there was. And I was also very apprehensive that the courts wouldn't really understand what I was saying because nobody knew what is sand mining. And nobody thought that it was an issue which needed to be taken up like this, because they said, after all, you need sand for construction. And anyway, there's plenty of sand lying around. Don't worry. So the collector said to me, he said, don't worry, madam. There's plenty of sand. And if you take away a little bit, the sea will bring in more. So you go home and don't worry about such things. So, but anyway, I did, and I filed the PIL. And then soon after we got the first favorable order on sand mining, I went on a site visit to another spot because villagers started calling me and saying, come and see what's happening in our areas. And I was attacked again at Mahad in 2010. This time, the intention was to kill us because we were in a very lonely part of the mountains. We had a very dramatic Bollywood style chase through the mountains. I was driving. These guys tried to shove us off the road. Finally, after 10 or 15 kilometers, where I was sitting in the car thinking, my husband is going to kill me, and also that I can't believe I'm doing this. I've seen this scene in a film. I never thought I'd be living it. I found myself on a bridge with a drop of 100 feet below, and a truck crashed into us. Fortunately, I slowed down and I braked very sharply, and the car was damaged, but you can see this is the car at the police station. But we were not killed, and it wasn't an accident. Later on, the High Court said that there should be an investigation, and there was an FIR filed and a charge sheet with the clauses of attempt to murder. So that's where sand mining started, and that's where the press started reporting it, because they were interested in the attacks, not because they were interested in sand. But as time went on, it became more and more obvious that sand mining was actually something for which people were getting attacked and killed, whether they were activists or local villagers or even government and police officers. And of course, there were reports of attacks all over the country. But this is in 2019 in Virar, where they tried to mow down a cop in the middle of the night. So you can see how the sand mining attacks escalated, and with that awareness about sand. But at the same time, sand mining continued because even the government was too scared, really. Many times the government was too scared to interfere in sand mining sites. So what do? You have, of course, court orders, but court orders have to be implemented. And one of the ways to implement court orders is to create awareness and change. And so we did a campaign. This is called Don't Bury the Issue of Sand Mining. And we presented this Don't Bury the Issue of Sand Mining to the UN in 2012. The UN had their first convention of biodiversity in India in 2012, not first convention, it was the 11th meeting of parties, but the first in India in 2012. And we presented Don't Bury the Issue of Sand Mining. And I was so shocked to discover that not only was sand mining a completely unknown subject in India, but it was a completely unknown subject all over the world, because the UN said that coastal issues are among the most important issues on our agenda. But we don't have a single document or paper or report on sand mining. In fact, we don't know what you're talking about. In the same way, I'd like to talk about another issue that I worked on at the same time. You know, I live in Mumbai. I don't live in Alibag or Kihim, although I visit there often and I've grown up there. So I wanted to take up an issue in the city. And I'd like to talk about the parallels and differences between taking up city issues and rural issues like sand mining and the tools that you have. So ultimately, when you talk of awareness, you have to create awareness not only among people, but among implementing authorities. So I talked about creating awareness about how even cops are attacked. There's another issue that I took up, noise pollution. And this is training the police a couple of years ago, because when the court ordered, again, when the court ordered that the police should take action against noise pollution, what became obvious was that the police didn't know how to take action. They didn't know at that time how to use a decibel meter or what laws worked. So this is training the police in Mumbai. We've done various other training programs too. Public participation. I talked about how people in Mahad complaining, how the person even in Kihim, how the local villagers finally stopped sand mining in Kihim. This is at a, at a street festival, the Ganpati festival, where you would think people ask me, aren't you afraid to go to these festivals and take noise readings? But I have found that when you talk to people and explain to them that these are all issues of your own health, they're actually very concerned, because everybody is concerned about what concerns him directly, his own health. So they have really stepped up, I have to say, and it's only the people of this wonderful city which perhaps could have stepped up like this. There were other issues in sand mining which became obvious. Child labor, you can see this child. He said he had fever, he couldn't go to school, so he was sent on a sand mining site. And I thought, what a different reaction from if my child had fever. And then I met the sand mining mafias. The sand mafia is a term which I made up myself, because when I was attacked, I realized there was such a nexus between administration, politics, and sand miners. So I mean, that fits the definition of a sand miner, of a sand mafia. And we discovered the sand mafia in so many parts of the world. But when you meet the people, you discover a very different story, because you realize that they're actually very pathetic, many of them. Here's sand mining happening under the railway bridge at Vaitarna, where there's a train going overhead. That's the main line where all the trains go, the Rajdhani, all the long distance trains, all the short distance trains, local trains, and there's sand mining right under the bridge. The railways authorities wrote to the government a number of times, but it had no effect. This is 2013. In 2016, a road bridge at Vaitarna near Mahad, where I was attacked, collapsed, and some people died, some vehicles were washed away. And I realized, and I said that there should be an investigation as to whether sand mining weakened the foundations of the bridge. But unfortunately, not only was that study never carried out, but we were told, the minister said at the time, that sand mining had nothing to do with it. So those are the forces you're facing, and they aren't easy forces. But you have to keep trying, right? So then in 2018, finally, the UN decided that sand mining is an issue. I participated in a documentary film which was called Sand Wars, which was released in Paris in 2013. And the UN watched it, and they decided that sand mining is an issue. It became apparent that sand mining was happening all over the world, that there was a huge international trade in sand, and it also became apparent that sand is the second most extracted material in the world after water, because sand is used for every single aspect of our built civilization, whether it's construction of buildings, roads, bridges, infrastructure, everything. So when you say, don't worry, madam, there's more sand which the sea will bring in, it's not an inexhaustible reserve. And so I addressed the UN virtually, because this conference was held in Geneva, and I addressed them virtually in 2018. And in 2019, they came out with the very first report on sand mining. In that report, they said that India and China lead the world in sand extraction, because we have the maximum amount of GDP growth which requires sand. GDP and cement concrete construction cannot take place without sand in today's world, in today's technology. And they also concluded that two things. One was that the UN policies which could be made would be unimplementable without data from the ground, such as the data that we were generating in India, telling them why the policies couldn't work, however good they looked on paper, unless they took into effect the fact of there being a mafia, of there being violent resistance, of there being no studies conducted as to the demand and supply situation. How much sand do we have? How much sand are we going to use? And lastly, of putting the whole burden of controlling sand mining on local district level officers and policemen who are themselves under threat and attack. So the UN accepted all this. They also accepted that India and China had the capability of leading the world in finding solutions, because we also hold the keys of recycling material in the circular economy. We have enough garbage that can, what we call garbage, but actually waste and garbage is not useless. It can be recycled. Debris can be directly recycled. We have led the world. We have pioneered technologies to build roads using plastic, other types of industrial waste, and we do have this capability. So we needed the UN finally for us to tell them that we have done this, and then for them to tell us that you can do it, you can lead the world. Similarly, in the other issue that I've talked about, noise pollution, noise levels during festivals were at their lowest in 2019 because of public participation. And again, I thank the citizens of this city in realizing that things can change, they should change depending when the world changes. The Ganpati Mandals voluntarily gave up the use of DJs during their festivals, and they were followed by every other cultural and religious festival. Eid al-Milad was the quietest last year. Diwali was the quietest last year because children led their parents. And of course, Ganpati was the quietest because the mandals decided. And they took that forward even this year. And of course, this year there were other reasons like COVID for taking it further. But I'd like to believe, and I hope it's true, which we'll discover next year whether it is or not, that so many years, 20 years of teaching people, of taking them, there's no you and there's no me, we are all in it together, resulted in the quietest festival even last year, the year before that, 2017. And so the ability that we have to celebrate, to enjoy our celebrations, to have fun, to do what's required without making noise, without disturbing our own health, is a cumulative effect of all these campaigns and things. And that has helped us and been of great service to us during our trials during COVID. Last year, the Mumbai police and we jointly released this poster, "Thank you, Mumbaikars, for converting atom bombs into diyas." This year, during coronavirus, when the coronavirus started, this is something I wrote for the Mumbai Mirror, "The Sound and Fury of Silence," where we realized for the first time that sitting at home in our urban areas, nature surrounds us, even in cities. There are many people who have never appreciated or stopped to listen and think about the sounds of nature surrounding you every day. That's a roadside tree outside my window, and I enjoy the sound of the birds every day. We started a Twitter campaign called Songs of Nature. I took a video, hashtag Songs of Nature. I took a video of the birds singing in my window in the morning and encouraged people to participate, to first of all, sit back, think, listen to the sounds of nature, appreciate the roadside tree. The tree doesn't have to be in your garden for you to care for it, for the birds to come there, to appreciate nature, to look at those birds and songs, to take videos, post them, hashtag Songs of Nature, and share them so that all of us can appreciate these wonderful sounds that surround us of nature in our own homes. And now we're working from home. So we're working from home to protect wildlife. We're working from home to create increased awareness. And I think whether you work from home or out on the streets, as my grandmother did, or in any way whatsoever, it's better to work than not to work, and to create love for nature, love for the environment, safety from pollution, and realize we're all part of it. There are always answers. We're all part of the problem, but we're equally all part of the solution. And I look to all of you with great hope that you will find the solutions. Maybe it's not up to people like me to find the solutions, it's up to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Miss. Your work in this field is truly inspiring. We will now be moving on to the question and answer section. Miss,
Okay.
is it possible to stop sharing screen?
Yeah, I'll try.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a few questions that we've been asked by attendees. So I'm just gonna read those out. So the first question here is there socioeconomic is there a socioeconomic angle to the impacts of noise pollution as we see slums living dangerously close to airports and they're clearly at a higher risk than the privileged urban population?
Of course, there is always a socio-economic aspect to everything that we do. And when I started, people told me this is a very elitist subject, noise pollution, and you should not really, only you guys come from the West, you have Western ideas, and only you're interested. But actually, when I started working, one of the things that happened was that I started getting calls from people telling me about their own experiences, and that's what really made me more committed to the issue and subject, because I myself hadn't realized. And I realized that actually slum dwellers were even more affected in a way than people who thought it was an elitist subject, because they said, we live, as you said, near the airports, we live near roads, um, we don't have doors and windows, we can't shut them and put on our AC. And if our neighbor does it, we live so close to our neighbor that we literally can't even say anything. So if you can listen to us. So I realized that actually everybody is affected, but everyone wants the other person to stop first. So there's a socio-economic aspect, there's a cultural aspect which is being used to create divides, when in fact there is no divide. And that's why I'm so happy that last year the Ganpati Mandals, as I said, voluntarily gave up and had such a quiet festival. The Eid-e-Milad festival followed and was the quietest ever. And I think if we can all stop saying that you should do it first, whether it's rich and poor, whether it's different cultural divides, and say, I will do it first, that's the right way.
Right. And our second question was in 2016, the Bombay High Court mandated that noise level restrictions were applicable to religious places too, after constant pressure from you. This obviously was not an easy condition to implement. How did you manage to get around the usual apprehension when approaching religious practices to push the courts to restrict them too?
Well, I think noise has nothing to do with religion. Noise is a health issue, and we need to take it as such. So, a lot of people have a lot of things to say, um, but I think you have to understand that they're not saying it because they necessarily have anything against you in particular, but because they have been misinformed, miseducated, and they don't understand. So I don't think it's a you or me approach at all. I think it's inclusive. And it's very good that people have taken it up. Having said that, the festivals have reduced in noise, but the religious places, some of them, continue as before. And perhaps that's the next campaign. And I look to people to complain. They must complain, because you start with yourself. You should make sure you're not doing it yourself, but then the next step is to complain, and not to think wo kuch nahi hoga. It's there are ways to complain, and if you want to know the ways, I'm always there to guide you.
We are looking forward to getting those tips from you. Our third question is you have found the movement against intimidation, threat, and revenge against activists. Have you found a more frequent targeting of women activists in comparison with the treatment of your male colleagues might receive?
I think everyone's at risk, really. It's the question is, there are different methodologies which will hurt women and which will hurt men. Um, so I think when you decide that you want to hurt people, or you want to block people or stop them, then there's no holds barred, right? So anything that works, and of course, the more insulting and the more rude and the more hurtful you are, the more likely the person is to give up. I myself was attacked. I was nearly killed. So I know the intention of actions like that, whether they're rape threats or whether they're calling you names or whether they're telling you to go away or whether they're actually to physically try and kill you or actually kill you, which people have been killed, are meant as deterrents, both to yourself and to the person following you. But I think, again, there are ways to deal with it. And Mitra is meant to be a movement to show that while every NGO and every person has a right to free democratic speech, to differences of opinion, to all that, and all of it is welcome. When it comes to attacks and violence, we're all together, men and women.
That's incredibly true. Our fourth question would be: noise pollution has not always been at the forefront of environmental movements, and people tend to accept it as a part of Mumbai's atmosphere. What encouraged you to challenge such a deep seated notion?
I had no idea what I was doing. I just put it like that. I had very young children and I wanted to do something in the city. My uncle was working on noise because he was very disturbed by a marriage hall next to his house. And that's how I started. I went to court at his request, but it's only when people started calling me after we got the first court order, actually. When people started calling me and telling me these heartrending stories that I realized. So I can't say I had any great either personal reason for doing it or any great commitment even to it until I started hearing people's stories. I heard of a child having convulsions because of noise. I saw that child. I saw this woman having a psychotic fit, screaming and crying, and her husband trying to calm her down. I heard of somebody threatening to commit suicide because he couldn't stand the sound. This old lady telling me how she was getting palpitations. So when you hear these stories again and again and again, and you realize that they all, and many times people would say things like, we know you can't help us, there's nothing you can do because the city is, people think I'm the crazy one because I'm the one who has a problem with noise. But just the fact that you've listened and not told us you're crazy, even that has been helpful. So I take it kind of like like a mental health hotline almost. It started like that. And then getting people to realize that no, it's not you alone. You're not the only sensitive person. There's others.
Okay. So there are a couple of more questions. So what is the current scenario on sand mining from India's perspective?
Currently, we are not in a good shape. We have a lot of awareness now that sand mining is a huge issue. As I said, it's the second most extracted material in the world after water. That really is huge. And because so much sand mining is illegal, it seems probable that if it were quantified in terms of numbers, um, it would be the largest single scam in our country. But no one is giving us that data or figures, so we can't say it quite like that. At the same time, as I said, the UN has said that we also hold the key to solutions. And I'm very hopeful that maybe there's a huge pushback. People don't want to give us those solutions and the answers in the current system that we believe in, which is that we measure everything by GDP growth. But I'm very hopeful that when we realize the actual cost, economic cost of sand mining, in terms of the destruction we're causing, in terms of days work, lost of work due to climate change related events, in terms of the fact that all our cities, our major cities are threatened by climate change, including Mumbai, and sea level rise, and we're taking away the buffer, which is sand, that it's you guys who will grow up and in different fields of work, find those solutions and mainstream them. There's a place in there for every single field. You don't have to be an environmentalist, you don't have to be an activist. Avas Foundation does not take any donation because all the work has been voluntary by professionals in every field, whether it's, whatever it may be, from legal work to technical solutions to advertising to everything possible. So all of you will be working in different fields and it's up to you to to figure it out. We're there to help.
Yeah. And how do we educate people to reduce noise pollution and create more concern for the environment as a whole?
Talk about it. I think it's the young people who are educating the elders. Definitely that's how it worked with firecrackers, because the children stopped or refused to let their parents buy crackers. And so many stories of children who, for various reasons, decided that they would rather do other things with that money, donate it to good causes or do something else, whatever. So I think talk about it. That's the most important thing you can do. And of course, there are technical solutions there too, because again, loudspeakers are the technology of 100 or 80 years ago. You know, when festivals started being celebrated thousands of years ago, the loudspeakers didn't exist. They came into existence in the 1900s. Today we've moved on. You can celebrate using radio frequencies, TV channels, headphones. Everybody has a mobile phone. You can communicate through so many different mediums, which are more exciting, more fun. Your Instagram or your whatever, Twitter or Facebook or whatever, all these mediums are the right mediums to use. And I think we're wasting an opportunity. My last slide said we're working from home. All of us are working from home today. And we're proving that we can. We're having this webinar working from home.
These are activities of conservation. Mr. Dayanand